to announce the most wonderful work ever struck off at a given time, aim and purpose of man. It is meet and proper that we allow our thoughts to dwell a little while tonight upon these momentous declarations of the Constitution, designed to fix and perpetuate fundamental rights and liberties for all time, and without change, impairment, or diminution. The American Bill of Rights must be sought in the ancient records of the Anglo-Saxon race. There we find the first traces of the idea of self-government, which has characterized our ancestors and their history. The Saxons, when they invaded England, brought with them their concept of government, and with it their habits of free speech and free meeting, and of equal justice man to man. This rooted passion for freedom was brought safely across the succeeding age of Norman tyranny by the descendants of the Anglo-Saxons, to whose unwearied battle through the centuries for self-government we owe our rights as freemen, because they had not the means of resistance, but slavism in their hearts, and always they seized the first opportunity that offered to draw sword for the restoration of their rights. Such an opportunity came in the year of the Great Charter in the 13th century. The barons, spurred by the widespread discontent of the people, gathered on the Thames meadow at Runnymede, mounted and armed, to protest to the king the violation of the rights of English rule. Great were the transactions of that day. Before dusk, the Magna Carta had been discussed, agreed to, and signed. The declarations of this famous charter, known in history as the Magna Carta, in times of popular stirring and revolt, repeatedly invoked and solemnly reaffirmed until we find them almost literally embodied in our Constitution as its first 10 amendments. How it still speaks to us, this venerable parchment, in words faded with time, but still aglow with eloquence that moves our deepest feelings. It proclaims mankind's supreme concern for justice, for security of person and property, and his determination that his government shall be a good government. No freeman, it says, shall be seized or imprisoned or dispossessed or outlawed or in any way brought to ruin. We will not go against any man nor stand against him, save by legal judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. To no man, it continues in grave and simple language, will we sell or deny or delay right or justice. The charter was published throughout the country and sworn to in meetings held in every town. Its enforcement was entrusted to a council of 24 with the right of declaring war on the king should its provisions be infringed. Again, in the reign of Charles I, 4 centuries later, the people were roused to open revolt in defense of their liberty. The king, after years of tyranny and misrule, had asked his restless people to take the royal word for their liberty. This they had no intention of doing. They had learned only too well the little worth of the royal word. The nation was overwhelmed with debt. The treasury was empty. The demand went up that the king convene the parliament, which despite reluctance he was forced to do. It met in a somber and resolute mood. In the election of its members, those who represented the crown were everywhere rejected. The patriot leaders of the people were triumphantly returned. Who have suffered in the recent resistance to the crown was the sure road to a seat in the new parliament. Its first business was to demand the redress of the wrongs done to their liberties. We must vindicate our ancient liberties, said the angered parliament. We must reinforce the laws made by our ancestors. We must set such a stamp upon them as no licentious spirit shall ever dare hereafter to invade. The Commons proceeded to adopt a petition of right, as they called their catalogue of injuries. It bore much resemblance to the Great Charter, but the old abuses soon returned. The kings proved backward pupils in the school of liberty. The lessons of English history were hard for them to learn. Barely 60 years were to pass when the people were again moved to revolt. This time, the popular feelings would not be appeased. The king fled the realm. The right was claimed and established by the people who could chose him, and set upon the throne whom they would. An English king became henceforth the creation of the Parliament. Before a new monarch was seated on the throne, however, the Commons exacted his consent to a Bill of Rights, which is interesting to us tonight, as being the first time the enumeration of the ancient rights of the people was described as a Bill of Rights. It is interesting for a further and weightier reason. The earlier charters, including Magna Carta, were promises wrung from the throne, or petitions of right addressed to the monarch, seeking recognition of certain privileges which the people felt to be their natural rights. As I have pointed out, the last petition of right to be addressed to an English king was in the early 17th century. With the English Revolution of 1688, a momentous change occurred. After this flight and abdication of James II, the Parliament said it was through petitioning for right. The king was no longer to be unseated. Henceforth, Parliament was assert its right. No longer was it satisfied to have a royal master. It demanded not legislation, but a participation in its government. And Parliament was ready to offer the vacant throne of England to the Prince of Orange. It offered him the crown in one hand, but in the other it held an enumeration of privileges no longer sought as favors from the crown, but demanded by the people as their right. And so the most popular Parliament called its demand not a petition of right, but a Bill of Rights. We get the expression, a Bill of Rights, from this momentous change of outlook on the part of the English people. The course of events in the English Revolution was familiar to the colonists in America. So when at the close of our war, the Revolution, a convention of the original states framed the Constitution, it was inevitable that the people should look for an enumeration of the rights and immunities that had been taught by history to regard as indispensable to the preservation of their freedom. When, however, the draft of the Constitution was submitted to the states for ratification, as has been pointed out to me tonight, its failure to include a Bill of Rights was at once noted and was the subject of standing nonsense. Although it was argued that our basic rights were sufficiently set forth in the Constitution, it was apparent today that there should be a clear recital of them. These rights which the states regarded as inalienable, which they would never delegate even to their own government, and which the government would be forbidden ever to infringe. Thus was given by the framers of our Constitution added emphasis to the nature and origin of a Bill of Rights. In the American view, these rights proceeded not from any executive, not from any ruler, but solely and exclusively from the inherent sovereignty of the people. The result of these discussions was the adoption of the first 10 amendments at the first session of Congress, as has also been pointed out to you tonight. Nothing could be more historically correct than to describe these amendments as the American Bill of Rights. Such they were declared to be at the time of their adoption, and such they have ever since been known. There was a fear that this enumeration was necessary. There was fear of the shallow spirits who would seek to make the Constitution a vehicle for advancing his crude and visionary notions of government. In England, the Declaration of Rights had been directed not only to a withdrawal of powers from the king, but from the Parliament as well. A large proportion of the rights set forth in the Bill of 1689 consists of the solemn recognition of the limitation upon the power of Parliament against impairment of such rights as that of trial by jury, the right to personal liberty and private property according to the law of the land, and others whose enumeration you must now be quite familiar with. It was said by Woodrow Wilson, and well said, that the history of liberty is the limitation of governmental power, not the increase of it. An explicit Bill of Rights would serve to guide public opinion, as was thought at the time of the adoption of these amendments, would serve not only to guide it, but to render it more quick to detect and to resist attempts to disturb and diminish private rights. It would not prove an easy matter, they soundly reasoned, to trample down principles which have been constituted with reverence, and which are constantly placed before the people, accompanied by the imposing force and solemnity of a constitutional sanction. Passing now to the language of the amendment, I will not endeavor to repeat what has been so well stated as to the contents of these several amendments. As a whole, they are very brief. It is not an derogation of an important document that it should be brief. The whole history of the creation of the world is told in Genesis in 400 words. The address of Lincoln at Gettysburg was only a little over 200 words in length. This blessed Bill of Rights, which is the very foundation of our liberty, is only a little over 400 words in length. It is neat and right that we should append the letter of these solemn declarations. It was most impressive in the little chapter of this evening's exercises called the interpretation of the Bill of Rights, that it should consist primarily of an incalculable text. The First Amendment, I think, is the one from which the others may be said to stem, to be derived. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The provision respecting no establishment of religion and guaranteeing the free exercise thereof are not disputed in any quarter of this great land. The prohibition contained in the amendment, we pray sincerely and devoutly, will forever stand as a monument to the breadth and tolerance of our people. And the amendment proceeds, nor shall Congress ever abridge the freedom of speech of the press. A free press stands as the great interpreter between the government and the people. To allow it to be fettered is to fetter ourselves. The history of other countries will teach us the vast importance of the right of freedom of speech and of the press. Even to this day, in some countries it is a crime to speak on any subject, religious, philosophical, or political, contrary to the received opinions of the government. In some countries no works can be printed at all, whether of science, literature, or philosophy, without the prior authorization of the government. And the press has been shackled and compelled to speak the timid and cringing language which an official censor may license or permit. Liberty of the press does not include, of course, the right of wanton injury. Nevertheless, every individual has a right to speak or publish his sentiments on questions of public concern, on measures of government, and as to persons in official or quasi-official positions. To do this without control or fear of punishment for so doing is what constitutes the freedom of the press. This liberty, so essential it is to the security of freedom in the state, that it ought never to be restrained. It can never be violated without the destruction of every other freedom. It is a constitutional principle in this country, perhaps the most vital of any constitutional principle. Our liberty, said Thomas Jefferson, depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. Freedom of speech and of assembly, said President Franklin Roosevelt, are among the fundamentals of democracy, and all of them would be nullified if freedom of the press were ever successfully to be challenged. So has spoken every statesman, every historian, and every voice that has commanded public attention in the course of our history. It should be borne in mind that this right is not a right primarily of the press, but a right of the people. The provision in the Bill of Rights is intended to safeguard the people in the possession of this right, their right to a free press, a press that shall be free to write and speak and print without let or hindrance. The Constitution's solicitude is to enable every citizen at any time to bring the government or any person in authority to the bar of public opinion by any just criticism upon their conduct in the exercise of the authority which the people have conferred upon it. No one is exempt from criticism. As Jefferson said, no government ought ever to be without censor, and where the press is free, no government ever will. The remaining clause in this amendment secures the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of their grievances. This right would hardly seem necessary to be provided for in a republican government. It is impossible that it could be denied until the spirit of liberty had fully disappeared and the people had become so servile and debased as to be unfit to exercise any of the privileges of free men. The two following amendments affirm the right of the people to bear arms and to maintain a militia, and prohibit the quartering of soldiers in any house without the consent of the owner. It is sufficient to remark briefly that the militia is the natural defense of a great country against sudden invasion and domestic insurrection. The prohibition of quartering soldiery in the house of an owner in time of peace, except with the owner's consent, is a reference to an ancient oppression from which the people have suffered greatly. It is aimed to secure that great principle of the common law that every man's house is his castle, and secure against intrusion. The Fourth Amendment is one of substance and present application. It declares the right of the people to be secure in their person, houses, papers, and effects. Such a provision is indispensable to the full enjoyment of the right of personal security, personal liberty, and personal property. The Fifth and Sixth and Seventh Amendments are concerned with securing impartial justice to every citizen in the trial of criminal charges or civil acts. The next amendment prohibits excessive bail or fines or cruel or unusual punishment. It is an exact transcription of the clause to the same effect in the Bill of Rights of England, adopted in 1689. The draftsmen of our Constitution were familiar with the history of tyranny from the times of the Romans down to times within living memory. They knew that government under justice had flourished, but had languished and expired under the laws when they were of undue severity. Such excesses they proposed to avoid. Such is the Bill of Rights. It has been called the apex of the Constitution. It might better be called its foundation. The foundation of the government, and I'm quoting Lincoln's words, the government which was made by Washington. Indeed, the first step leading to the Constitutional Convention was an informal dinner which Washington gave at his home in Mount Vernon to the delegates from Virginia and Maryland who wished to discuss with him the regulation of the waterborne commerce of their respective states. This broadened into a later conference, attended by delegates from other states, which in turn developed into a convention of representatives of all the original states. Over this convention, Washington presided. It was the convention which adopted the Constitution. How vast the debt we owe to Washington. To his foresight, to his elevation of character, to his noble self-possession. This government, to repeat, made by Washington, has been tried in times of excitement and danger. It has stood firm and steady while ancient thrones have tottered, and republics in other lands have decayed, weakened by their prosperity, or debased by their corruption. These republics have not only perished, but perished by their own hands. Their people have been cheated out of their liberty by demagogues and soft pockets. The good and wise have been flouted, while unprincipled men have undermined public virtue by flattery and corrupt favor. Patronage and party, the triumph of a popular leader, and the discontent of a day have contributed to the collapse of many an ill-fated republic. We could never learn that republics are sustained and can only survive by the public spirit and intelligence of their citizens. Oh, my fellow Americans, let us hold to the Constitution. Let us keep it deep implanted in our hearts and affections. Let us treasure it. It is the cornerstone of every liberty which we enjoy, of the racial equality on which we pride ourselves, of the religious freedom which we possess in measure and certainty above all other people. It is the foundation of our national unity and of our strength. It is a noble inheritance that we possess. Let us never forget that it came from the toils and sacrifices of our forefathers and that if it is dutifully guarded, it will assure us and our descendants of the blessings of liberty and independence forever. Never did there devolve on any generation of men higher trust than now devolve upon us for the preservation of this Constitution and the harmony and peace of all who are destined to live on it.